Welcome to episode 45 of the Broadway Shuffle. And today we are joined by a very special guest. You've probably heard this guy's voice across the radio if you listen to Texas Tech Sports or Locked On Texas Tech. But host of Locked On Texas Tech, Chris Level, is joining the show. Chris, we appreciate you being on. How are you doing, sir?
Gentlemen, I'm doing good. I appreciate you letting me join your fine show, and I'll try not to bring the ratings down or anything like that. But yeah, man, you guys are nice to have me on.
Of course, man. Yeah, it's weird, honestly, talking to you here with your face in front of me because I'm so used to watching it just with you and Casey Cowan on Locked On. And then also, obviously, on your coaches' shows and everything you do for Texas Tech. So we're very excited to have you on. I wanted to kind of get right into starting with you and your career at Texas Tech and just talk, let our listeners and our fans know about what it's been like here in the last 17 years now on what you did kind of getting started in Texas Tech media and how you got into the podcast world with Locked On Texas Tech.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I've been doing some form or fashion of media or Texas Tech stuff since 2002, I guess would be right.
Wow.
When I started really dabbling in things with a website called RedRaiderExtreme.com, which is way back at the infancy of what Rivals.com was. I guess Giovanetti and I started a radio show in 2005 called Tech Talk, and I used to, Jack Dale, a longtime famous announcer, his name's up in the rafters. The media room's named after Jack Dale. I used to go on Jack's show once a week as kind of like a guest host, and we would talk recruiting or Tech football or basketball, whatever. And one time, Robert and I, we guest hosted together because I guess Jack and his son Steve were off or out of town or whatever it was, and we thought, man, this is fun, and we may be decent at it. And we had somebody from Raymar Communications kind of connect with us and say, what do you think about doing your own thing? And so that was back in I guess October of 2005. Wow. And we were on a news talk station, Fox Talk 950, and we just had 1 hour from 11 to noon, I guess it was. And yeah, I ended up doing some form of that show for 17 years up until about 3 or 2.5 years ago, I guess, whatever it was. And I worked with Giovanetti up until, I guess, like 2011, maybe. I guess he did it with me for about 6 or 7 years, and then I ran him off. Yeah, so no, he moved on to bigger and better things, as you guys know. And I worked with Brennan Rowie and Aaron Dickens. We kind of like one guy was doing it 3 days a week, one guy was doing it 2 days a week. I was the constant, and then it just ended up being Dickens and I. But all throughout, we went from a news talk station to then Raymar turned into an all sports radio station. Then they got the rights to all the Texas Tech games, and everything just kind of kept growing. But yeah, what you guys do, like in this podcast form, this is the way all this is going. I mean, there's a million podcasts out there. Everybody's podding, and it's got the whole thing, right? But this is the way I think people like to consume content. And I'll just tell you that it was a struggle for me to step away from a radio show that I felt like I was good at and I built into something, whatever that was. And I just struggled for about a year on if I wanted to keep doing that. And I finally, figured out something else that I could go do and that I was intrigued by, and I didn't want to give up the broadcasting stuff. I love that, but I just like grinding away at it on a day-to-day basis. I had zero intention when I walked away from Raymar Communications, I guess it was like June the 21st of, What would that be, like 2022 maybe? And I walked away. I had no plans to do anything daily or anything like that. And I get a call from a guy that was a talent scout in ESPN Dallas and all that. And he said, "Hey, somebody gave me your name. Want to know if you'd be interested." And as he's telling me this, I'm just kind of rolling my eyes. I'm like, dude, I just got out of this, man. I'm like kind of burned out. I'm trying to get away from like the grind of this thing. And anyway, long story short, that's how Locked On came to be. And Cowan and I always wanted to work together. And I'm probably giving you too long an answer here, but Cowan and I had always wanted to work together. And they when you have a station, you spread your talent out, and you have to have people that anchor certain programs at certain times of the day and all that stuff. And I get all that. So odds are we just went, and Cowan ended up not working for them anymore. And so that wasn't ever going to be a possibility. But he was the first person I thought of. I was like, man, I don't know if I'm interested in doing this, but I do know somebody that might be, and maybe we could work together, And so anyway, that's kind of how Locked On started. And they were like, dude, you got to work 20 to 25 minutes a day. And I'm thinking this is, I'd been doing 3 to 3.5 hours a day, 5 days a week for the most part. And, but I love what, this platform, I think it's great. It's the way that this thing is going, and it's really been a blessing. And I also do a podcast for Raymar once a week with Choice Woodman. So yeah, man, you guys are in a safe space. I think it's smart to do these things, and you just have to have people want to listen to what you have to say. And you guys certainly are building up a following. So, but that's kind of how Locked On came to be for me.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. You got to have people that want to listen to what you want to say. My wife was tired of hearing me talk about tech sports nonstop, so she's like, "You need to just go talk with your friends and do something else." So that's how we all ended up doing this. It's funny to me, and I'm always interested to hear, because Red Raider Sports was so fun for me as a college student. I remember finding that as a freshman and being like, "Oh my gosh, I'm like an insider. I've got all this information. It's so fun." What was it like starting that up? And do you have any favorite posters over the years, guys that really made you laugh? What is that like in 2024 with Twitter and all of that stuff? Just talk a little bit about Red Raider Sports.
Yeah, the message board communities. We were, when we were getting into that, and I didn't. I guess in some ways maybe we did start Red Raider Sports, but it was kind of an existing. We changed the name of it, and then kind of, because I was actually working for a Longhorn when I started out doing this, and I was getting. So I tell people that want to get into sports all the time. I was out of college 4 or 5 years from Tech, and when I started kind of dabbling in this, because what I was doing at the time, I just wasn't enjoying. It wasn't making me want to wake up every day, and I kind of was out at football practice, and I had a guy who was like, "Hey man, you interested in doing any writing?" And I'm like, "Sure." That's back in. That would have been back in like 2001 maybe. And I got paid like $80 a month for, I don't know, maybe a year. And I was just doing it because I liked it. It was fun. I enjoyed it. I liked being around it and all those things. And then that's when Robert and I got together. And then and the internet back then with the message board community, it wasn't anything like it is now. It's obviously changed a million different ways and all that. But, the internet guy back in the day, it was frowned upon. It's like you were in your mom's basement, like who is this? Who is this person? What do they think they know? Anybody can, write on the internet, whatever. And so we had to fight that stigma for many, many years, because Robert had a magazine, and that's what he was doing. He was taking the magazine, and he wanted to give it an online component. And that's how, we kind of connected and all those things. And then, Red Raider Sports has obviously been a thing since then, and it's grown to a huge online community. And every college in the country has a huge site or multiple sites like that, right? And there's 24/7, there's On3, and there's Rivals. And I don't know if we'll always be with Rivals, or how long I'll always be a part of that. But as far as favorite posters, we love all of our children equally, right?
Hey, as a father of two, come on.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, that's a tricky question to answer. Robert and I, we actually were talking about this story on a football trip, I don't know, 2 months ago or so. In the middle of the season, we were on a road trip, and we were reminiscing about. We had a poster. I think I would give you his real name, but that might be I might get in trouble. But his username.
Bleep it.
yeah, was Patriot Raider, and somehow he got mad about something on the site, and he kind of blamed Robert and I, and he actually mailed or wrote letters to our wives, and which kind of freaked me out a little bit, and told each of our wives what terrible humans we were for allowing him to be chastised on the internet and all this thing. Yeah, I mean, you deal with some crazy, but that's kind of what online stuff is. But shout out to Patriot Raider. You were an all-time favorite poster, man.
Dude, my wife needs
Patriot Raider.
I get chastised all the time. I need her to start writing letters. That'd be great.
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
Wow. Hey, you've been on the sidelines for a ton of big games at Tech. What was it like covering the 08 game against UT?
I actually, Robert and I were on that sideline that day. I wasn't actually doing the broadcasting stuff. I started that in 2010, but we were hosting the Mike Leach show at the time, and I'll just give you some build up to that. Giovanetti and I, we were hosting the show over in the what is now not even that building, doesn't even exist anymore, the FTF, and yeah, it was always interesting hosting Mike's show because there was typically one person is the host, but they kind of had Robert and I doing it because we were a team and we were doing our show together. But Mike would sometimes stroll in 20 minutes late to his own show, or maybe 30 minutes late to his own show, and it was just an hour. And so you didn't just want to have somebody sitting there talking to themselves for 20 to 30 minutes. And so Robert and I were both hosting it. But the week before, I guess the Thursday night before that Texas game, everybody was, had been camping out all week, and they were camped out all the way up to the steps of the FTF. Like when you would walk in that building and walk out, there were just people there. And it was just, you couldn't get away from kind of the chaos of what was about to happen. And Jackie Sherrill, former Texas A&M coach, was one of Mike's friends, and he sat in the offices with us as we did the show, and I was just I was like, this is wild, man, because Jackie Sherrill, he was pretty big name at one point in college football, especially with the Aggies, and he went on to coach Mississippi State like Mike did, I guess, now that I think about it. I just remember like media having to stay like in Abilene. They were having to get hotel rooms in Plainview because you had a lot of national people coming in, and Lubbock has grown so much, especially in the hotel space, and there just wasn't a lot of places to stay. But that was a fascinating week, and I hope that we get back to more of those because I feel like we reminisce about that so much because it was such a special moment, right? It was one of the best. The catch was one of the best moments in college football history, honestly. And we're probably all biased, but that's the facts. And shout out to Graham Harrell, who just got into the College Football Hall of Fame, long overdue. That whole week and build up, and then my typical Tech brain, I thought, oh man, they've won this game, and then Oklahoma State was coming in ranked the next week, and I thought, you're just going to give it back, aren't you? And they did, and they did it, and they crushed Oklahoma State, and then it was, we had the bye week, and then we went to Norman, and but that
Nobody
was
remembers that.
That was a good that was a fun, and I remember after the loss to Oklahoma, or maybe it was after you beat Baylor on Thanksgiving weekend and you finished up the regular season, and that was back when the BCS was in place, and I had somebody on Mike's staff reach out to me and go, there's no way we're getting into like one of those BCS games, is there? And I mean, we kind of knew it at the time. It was like, man, no, it's just, you were third in your what
division,
Big 12 South, division of the league, and it just, which those were three of the top teams in the country, but just the way the math worked and the way they had to get all those bids in there, it just, I don't know, it sucked having to go to the Cotton Bowl, which, I mean, that's you don't want to frown upon any kind of Cotton Bowl bid these days or even then, but you were hoping for a little bit more at that point.
Chris, did you do anything with the Red Raider Alley? What was the tent? Because right outside the Jones are like 1,000 kids camping out. Did y'all ever go do any interviews or anything? Because I was 12 years old when I was at that game, and I was like this place is nuts, man. I got to come to this school. And like, it was because, did you ever go into do anything with the students that week? Because that was crazy seeing all those tents outside of the Jones.
I think that because when we were doing radio, we were at the time Raymar Communications. It's not. They have a bunch of, like, Brad Moran is the owner, and at the time we were in an office when we were doing our show, and they were tied to several TV. It was Fox 34. They had all these TV stations and then radio stations under one roof and under their control, and they did have us do some TV stuff. I think some hits and things like that, because they were everybody was trying to figure out what worked and what. And so let's take these radio guys and let's put them on TV some, whether it was on newscasts, whatever. But then, I think they did. They set us up for a bit out there in the parking lot and just kind of hyped it up or interviewed. We just kind of did some stuff and all that. But I mean, I was really young into this deal. I mean, I'm 51, but I mean, and I was graduated from college, but I didn't go to college for this stuff. This is all, I learned so much of this on the fly and from people that now in the business, and now I've done it for so long that now everybody's like, hey, how do you do, but I was just kind of, every time somebody would say, hey, let's go try this, I'm like, sure, let's do it. And I get real nervous and all that, but we did get out there in the middle of all those crazy students. You may have been one of those. I don't know, but
I was out there, but I was 12, so I was sneaking through. But they had a population sign of like 890. It was like half of Lubbock was staying in Red Raider Alley. It was crazy. So Conrad, go ahead.
Yeah, Brennan's still the same height as he was when he was 12 too. So not much has changed.
Shots fired.
That is also true. I'm still 5'5". Yep.
We've all known each other. We've all known each other a while. Chris, you mentioned one of the things you brought up was doing Coach Leach's show, and you've obviously done those with Coach McGuire and Coach Kingsbury and Coach Tuberville and Coach Wells. What are some of the best stories from those shows? Just moments that stand out to you, and just when you think back on all the years and all the shows that are really special to you and your experience doing that.
Well, everybody is different. Everybody's got a different personality. And then when I'm talking, that's one of the, I guess, fun parts about what I do. And also one of the toughest parts about what I do is, like, I'm around these, because that's also part of, like, my broadcasting stuff, is that I have to interview them at halftime and then after the game, win or lose. And then you have to, you deal with them at their best, and I guess at some level at their worst, and some of who I've dealt with have just been like, Joey is like a dream for me, because he's the same person on a Tuesday afternoon that he is on a Saturday afternoon that he is whenever, whether it's June or early November when it's getting real stressful. I mean, that makes my life a lot easier. Mike was a little bit more, those were always, I never knew what I was getting into. And half the time Robert and I was like, he doesn't even want to talk football on this show, like, at all. Like, we'd ask him a football question, and he'd be like, what book are you guys reading these days? And I mean, he just would totally intentionally to change the subject, and there was just certain things that he didn't want to get into, and I kind of thought that was more what fans wanted to hear about the team and players and the upcoming opponents and all those things. And sometimes that was just the last thing. But he did, back when we used to take calls, he did get a call from an Aggie one time, and I think that's on YouTube, and he blasted this Aggie. And it was great. And another funny, and this may have stopped calls on that coach's show. Learfield, I think, put a stop to it, because most of these coaches shows now, they don't take, it's not a call-in show anymore. It's just a 1 hour, and you may take questions from the audience and all those things. But Tuberville took a question one time, and it was live. I mean, we're live on the. I'm like, let's go to Sue in Alabama. I think she was in Alabama, and she asked him some question that didn't make a lot of sense, and she kind of hung up and just yelled out, "Roll Tide," and he popped off. I'm surprised that lady's even got a phone if she's a Tide fan or something. And I'm like, I'm in the middle of the Iron Bowl, like stuff going on. And I'm here in Lubbock hosting the Texas Tech Coach Show with Tommy Tuberville here at Ruby Tequila's right there on University, which was a Mexican food restaurant. Right across.
Rest in peace.
And I think the week after they were like, hey, man, we're not going to do any more phone calls anymore, I think. I'm like, okay, all right, whatever. But that's some you never know what you're getting into. And Cliff would roll in, and then right at the time that he would need to, that just wasn't necessarily his thing. He was great whenever I was on, but he kind of came in, and then as soon as it was over, he would leave. And, we always do an assistant or a player and all those things. But Tuberville, he didn't want anybody else on that. That was his show. And so he was there for a full 1 hour. And during the commercials, he's out shaking hands, and you'd think he was a politician or something, right?
Yeah, you think he's a senator.
That's right. Yeah, there you go. I'm like, man, I got a little look behind the curtain way before. But anyway, so everybody, I did dread, and I even said this during a commercial break on our radio broadcast during the football game where nobody else could hear us other than just the guys on the crew. And I said to my producer, because I was on the field, and I said to my producer in the middle of a game, and it was the TCU game, that they put up 82 on us, and they ran out of fireworks. Okay, they'd shot off all the pyro for their budgeted year or whatever, and I already was thinking to myself, oh, how in the world am I going to get through this Thursday? Like, how do you make this entertaining? How do you engage? How do you, hey, coach, man, it just came up a bit short. And I think the final was like 82-27.
Yeah.
But, that's part of the deal, man. When you get into this stuff, you got to take the good with the bad. But we made it through it. And I always think to myself, no matter how devastating the loss is, I can get through a show when you've given up 82 points and the other team ran out of fireworks. And if I can get through that, then I can get through any coach's show, man. Yeah. So,
man, it's got to be so interesting because you get, so you're on the sideline, and then you obviously travel with the football team and you travel with the basketball team. So you get, relatively close with these coaching staffs, as close as anybody that's not actually, a member of the roster could be. Does that ever get hard as you're obviously a Texas Tech fan, but you also have a job, and then you have connections within the industry, and you maybe know some things going on behind the scenes. Does that get hard when you are maybe not a fan of a certain coach, or know some things that may be coming down the pipe that coach may not be aware of? Is that relationship difficult, or talk me through how some of that goes? I'm thinking specifically maybe toward the end of the Kingsbury years, or, when the stuff with Tuberville started to sour kind of there at the end.
Yeah, I wish I didn't. I guess I wish I didn't care so much, because we are when you get into this stuff, and like you guys right now, you're in the people business. You like each other's company, and you like talking about this stuff, and I can't help but get to know people. Yes, they work for my alma mater, and some of them are just passing through, some of which the guys you just mentioned there, they are one of us. They went here, played there, whatever. But it is a business, and that part is always very, very difficult for me. And I get that some people don't understand that or don't care. They just want to win or lose, and they don't really care the in-between or who it affects. But you can't help but get to know a lot of these people and their families, and that is very difficult. And I've never gotten used to that. And I could give you a million stories of how hard it is to watch somebody get let go, or how emotional it is, or it just tears you up. And you're right. I could tell you 3 or 4 times in the last, say, 6 years where I had a pretty good idea that somebody wasn't going to make it or be retained, and I don't know if they knew or not. But you have a job to do, and that part is not fun at all. It's just not. Like most recently, I felt like I knew Tim DeRuyter very well, and John Harris and I would visit with him on a weekly basis, and I knew Tim a lot, and I trusted Tim. He trusted me. We tried to tell his story. That's what, in a way, that's what your job is. You're trying to convey what what the program or that side of the ball or each player, whatever you're trying to, try to help tell their story. And that was hard to, that's just fairly recent, but I certainly get the results, and that's just part of the deal. But yeah, some of that, man, I just, the Chris Beard thing, Barrett Peary was an assistant here for Mark Adams's first year with a Sweet 16 year, and he was unceremoniously kind of, kicked to the curb, and I didn't understand that one. But all the football, I mean, I'm very close to Matt Wells. I just saw Matt Wells in Manhattan, Kansas. Got really close to him. And I get these don't work and people have opinions about it, but I can't help but get to know who these people are, and because everybody wants to win, and everybody's trying, but sometimes it doesn't work, and there's other, factors that go into this stuff too. But that part, man, yeah, I have a weak stomach for that kind of stuff, and I wish I was, I wish I could just put up a wall and not let your emotions get involved with people and not care. But that's just not who I am. You try, because again, I see them at their best and worst, and that's just part of it. But anytime somebody gets let go at the top of the food chain, it affects so many people. Yep. And they know what they're signing up for. I get that. And in most cases, they're well paid. But there's a lot of people that aren't well paid that are just left searching. But that's just part of the deal. But that part has never gotten easy for me. No.
Yeah. And speaking of Chris Beard, what was that like leading up to his departure? Like, what were you hearing, and how long in advance did you know that was a possibility?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't. Chris, I haven't talked to him much since he obviously left here, and especially since he's been at Ole Miss. We talked some when he was at Texas, but I've known Beard for, a long time, since he was here with Coach Knight at the start. And I got pretty close with him and Pat, Bob's son. And so I kind of got to see him, as a very young coach, and then got to see him at the, nearly at the top of the mountain. Just always remember, man, foul when you're up 3. But Chris, so we would have lots of conversations about life in general, and about he would always want to pick my brain on how the football program was going and how it was doing and all that, because. And he was genuinely curious, because I think he just enjoyed football, but he also knew that the better the football program did, the bigger budget he may have, or the more stability the athletic department would have. I mean, I'm not stupid. I mean, he would, and I get it. That's the business part of this deal. And he was always, really curious about just, what was going on with football whenever we would, when I was going up and down the roads with him and stuff. But he always was one that would tell you that you always have to keep an edge about yourself. You can never get complacent. And he'd probably look at what I do, and if I've been doing what I do for so long, and say, you're complacent, you're happy, and which I am, and maybe I am complacent. I don't know, but he always has to keep it moving. You go look at his career; he's never really been anywhere for very long at all. And in fact, the stint when he was an assistant under Coach Knight, that was the longest he's really ever been anywhere in his professional career. So I always knew that he, in the back of his mind, and did he, when you go to the national championship game, can you ever live up to that? Can you ever get back? Are you always going to be compared to that? Sure. And he went to Texas, and so I did. I was fearful of him accepting that job when it became open, and I was heartbroken whenever I found out. And Jeff Goodman, I guess, was the first person that I actually saw break it. And I don't know, 30 minutes later, I get a call from Beard, and I did not answer. I was a wreck, because I was angry. I didn't know what to think. I felt like Lubbock was burning down. It was just chaotic, right? I mean, it was wild. And Beard called me, and I didn't answer it. And I just wasn't prepared to talk to him. And I had already talked to somebody that had just talked to him. And Chris was extremely emotional, just because I think this was very hard for him to leave this place, because this place was really good to him, and he knows that. But mentally, I wasn't ready to to talk to him, and I didn't know what to say, and I didn't want to. I just wasn't ready for it, and he called me about an hour later, and I didn't answer it because I just wasn't prepared to, and I probably regret that, not having that conversation. We would, that was on, I guess, on what was that, like on April 1st? And I'm trying to remember when Easter was. Easter was like a handful of days later, and Easter Sunday rolled around, and I guess I just woke up and I was like, you can't walk around with this inside of you. And so I just sent him a long text, and I said, hey man, I'm sorry I didn't answer your call. I wasn't ready to talk to you, and I just this has all been hard. I've known you for a long time. I just kind of spilled it, and he wrote me a long text back, and it was good, and I felt like I guess it's some semblance I had some closure, but it was still hard. And was I a wreck before we played them in Austin and before they came here and all that? Yeah, it was so strange. Yeah. But I'm glad we beat them both times. I hate Texas. I hate them. So that was just that deal. That's one of the whenever Beard brought Texas to Lubbock, and over the bus incident, and you just had it was just what was there 5,000 people out there, on a weekday tailgating, everything. That's one of the most juiced up athletic events that anybody would ever pretend to be in at all, because there was pure hate there, and that you can't fake that kind of emotion. It was wild. But yeah, that's I mean, we can keep going about Beard if you want, but
yeah, we had Avery Benson on a couple months ago.
Okay, see, and he was in the middle of that on both sides.
He was telling us about that in some of the locker room conversations, and it was man, that's one game I wish, like you said, I pretend to be there. That was a crazy atmosphere. What was that?
And what's crazy about Avery? Well, real quick, what's crazy about Avery is that if you think back, I don't know what all he shared here, but that was a strange dynamic in that. So Chris leaves, he takes most of the staff with him and all that. And then Mark obviously didn't get on the plane, and he stays here, and Mark's kind of was the vulnerable one, and you're like, everybody's rallying around Mark, right? And you're trying to, okay, what can he bring in here? Who's he going to hire? And you just felt like, okay, what's going on? And Avery, and I'm trying to remember how long it was, but he stayed around here for a period of time, and then he, kind of slipped out of town and ended up being on Texas's roster. And you're just like, and it's just crazy because I Mark was like, can you believe this? And I was like, no, coach, I can't. I don't know what to tell you. And now Mark and Chris are on the same sideline again together. So it's just funny how full circle everything goes. So it's all a business, man.
Yeah, you mentioned the plane thing. Is that true? That he truly did not get on a plane?
Well, so I mean that was just the famous. That's like the put it on the t-shirt type slogan. But I think Mark was at the time, and obviously we know so much happened after this and with everything. But yeah, which probably is not good for these airwaves.
We'll skip that year.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, but Mark he wanted to give this a shot, and I think Chris had told him, you don't have any chance at this deal. They're going to go hire somebody young, and they were. Chris was really frustrated, and I think he kind of was maybe say angry that Mark didn't go with him. And I think Mark was just like, so what would have happened if Mark doesn't get the job here? Does he eventually join Chris's staff and is the defensive coordinator and all those things? I mean, maybe, I don't know, but yeah, initially it was pretty tense, but it's not like, hey, he was trying to bring him with him. Sure. And I guess theoretically, yeah, he just didn't go get on the plane down there. But I think it was because he was just going to run out the ground ball here, man. He was going to stay here and try to do everything he could to get this job here. And he ultimately did. If it was him and Darvin, I guess, were the two finalists. And, I mean, obviously it worked for 1 year, but not the next one.
Yep, yeah. The first year was great. We can just remember that one.
Yeah, just the
Yeah,
1 year.
yeah. Chris, I mean, you've obviously been in this business for a long time. I'm sure you get a lot of information, both good and bad. How do you decide if you get a tip or someone calls in or shoots you a text, what is actually true and what is actually worth
Yeah.
sharing, where you feel, okay, this is credible, or I've heard this, I can maybe post this, or let somebody know that this is happening?
It depends on who it comes from, and you have to where I mentioned this earlier, you're in the people business, and you have to have very good relationships with certain people and earn their trust. And if you burn it, you may never ever get it back. That's what I would tell younger people in this deal. Everybody tries to run to be first and breaking news, and then when I used to be into that a long time ago, and it looks sexy, it sounds sexy, and all those things, but you are wrong one time,
Mm-hmm.
and you can't get it back, especially if it's something pretty big. So that all depends on where that info comes from. And then sometimes, I mean, I'm old enough now where I'm not out there I'm not trying to like go break a story or kind of go be the, there's so many people out there that are doing that, and good for them. But I'm more, I think, because I used to do the recruiting stuff, right? And it used to be a big deal when, like, okay, breaking news, this kid commits, and that was like
Yeah.
the news.
Mhm.
I was always more fascinated, which is why I was good at radio, maybe, or like the podcast stuff. To me, it's all about the chase or the context. Okay, that's
Mhm.
great. So and so committed. Who is this, and what does it even mean?
Mhm.
That's
Sure.
where I feel like shows like this and what I do on Locked On, you fill in the blanks. You explain, okay, the how, the why, the when, the where, all that stuff, and that's where so I get more out of that and trying to educate, or at least if people want to listen to what I have to say or not, I try to do my best with real info and or very educated opinion. And I'm not perfect. I may be off on some things, but that's just you have this many reps at it, you're going to screw up sometimes. But it's all about where it comes from, to be honest with you. And you have to know the right people, because if you're talking to the wrong person and they tell you something and you go with it, I mean, especially in somebody like, I wear so many hats that it would be very JV of me to screw something up like that. So I just don't. I wouldn't. It's all about where it comes from, though, man. It's all about relationships and where that info comes from.
Is that relationship interesting? Because I imagine when people share things with you, they know who they're sharing it with. They know that you run a show. They know that you run Red Raider Sports, and they know that information has the potential to, maybe be shared. Do they explicitly tell you, like, hey, listen, you can share this, you can't share this, or do they leave that up to your discretion?
Sometimes they want you to,
Sure.
but it's like, hey, just so you know, and you're like, okay, like you're their outlet, or we want to get this out there, whatever it may be, and but I'm not. I think I've been around long enough, and I don't know, but the people that I would talk to, they don't have to tell me that. Like, I'm not an idiot. And again, because all it takes is the one time, and hopefully my track record would speak for itself on burning somebody, and it's hard to keep secrets in this business these days.
Sure.
There's not a lot that and there's still stuff that, like, I'll know. And I mean, it's not really that big of a deal, and it'll end up on Red Raider Sports, and I'll like, how did somebody find that out? But it's this is a big city, but it's a small city from the standpoint of everybody knows somebody, and it's just, I always amazed at how some stuff tries to be kept quiet or whatever, and it's just, at some level, it's just unrealistic in a lot of cases, especially these days with so many people involved and so many platforms and ways to get information out there. So that's why, like, Red Raider Sports has changed so much, because that site is so much about the community and people wanting to be happy together, be angry together, intermingle together and talk about the new
Yell
Netflix
at each
show, or yell at each other,
Yeah.
whatever it may be, or the bad play call, or whatever it may be. And that's the beauty of that community. But it's hard to keep a lid on stuff these days, because I walk around with plenty of stuff that I just happen to find out, or that you see or hear, and I don't tell anybody. And then I'll get a text from a buddy going, "Hey man, so what's the deal with?" And I'm like, and I'll want to say. Sometimes I just have to ignore my buddies, but sometimes I'll just think to myself, how did they find this out? Or man, maybe I'm not getting that exclusive of info or anything, but whatever. Yeah. So
Interesting.
Yeah. Speaking of Red Raider sports rumors, is it true that Eric Musselman reached out about the Tech job after Beard left? Because I did not believe that the first time I heard it until this last summer with what he pulled with SMU and USC and all that.
I don't believe that to be true, but if he did, it wasn't real. It was him playing the game and trying to get a raise, or trying to. Muss, I guess, as he's known in the business, he's a lot like Chris in that just doesn't stay anywhere for very long. And there's a lot of these coaches that just hop around and they leverage it. And Lane Kiffin. I mean, there's a lot of these guys. It's just they're professional coach hoppers. That's why whenever you get somebody that has a connection with your city or your program, and they stand for the right things and they're a good fit, you just want to hold on to them for dear life. And they're so easy to root for, because there's other people that are like a Tommy Tuberville that are really just passing through. They're just kind of, hey man, it's a good fit at the time. Let's try to get this thing turned around, but then you're out of here, kind of deal. And, but no, I don't believe that to be accurate on Muss. But if there's any truth to that, it wasn't with him actually wanting to be the coach here. It was him trying to leverage his situation wherever he was or wherever he was trying to go.
Gotcha.
Yeah, you mentioned getting a lot of tips and texts or hearing things. What's maybe the weirdest bit of information that you've ever gotten? Maybe that wasn't true, and maybe you just raised your eyebrows and like, oh, there's no way that's true, and obviously it ends up being false, maybe weird, untrue. Does anything come to mind there?
Yeah, no. I mean, like I you never know who's going to reach out to you and when. The weirdest one for me along those lines, now this ended up being true, and that's what it's not answering your question, but it actually shocked me because it was true.
Okay.
I was, I guess it was Wells's last year, and you had just lost to Kansas State at home, and I have to go over to the FTF to interview him for postgame. And so I go over there, and I'm trying to, he would visit all coaches. They'll go visit with the team, and they got to do a few other things, and they would end up seeing me. And we're on a bit of a time crunch because we're live on the air, and we got to get that interview to on the air before they go off the air. And so I guess it was like 15 minutes after the game ended, and I get a text, and it said, "That's the final straw. Matt's going to be let go." And
Dang.
I looked at it, and I'm about to interview him.
Mhm.
And this was from, a pretty good source. And I was like, oh my, and so I just, and then like 2 minutes later, I'm sitting at a table across from him, and I was friends with Matt, and I'm interviewing him, and I'm trying to, we're just doing the thing. And lo and behold, Monday morning, there was a change made, and I never forgot that. But I was not. I mean, remember, you're 5-3, and I just didn't know if it had reached that point quite yet, but it certainly had. And but yeah, I just was, and I guess that was one of those where not that I didn't want to believe it, I was just it just shocked me, and because it's middle of the season, and that's not, you don't see that happen much, especially at Texas Tech. But yeah, it was true. So that answers your question because that was one that I guess I didn't believe it ended up being accurate, as opposed to something crazy that was sent to me that wasn't true. But
wow, that's impressive stuff. I don't know how you balance all of those things.
Yeah.
I want to get to, maybe that's a little, sad. You never like to see guys get let go. I want to talk a little bit about the 25 football team. Obviously, they've brought in a lot of transfers. It's very highly regarded, highly touted class. We've been debating a lot of different things. Kind of two topics I'd love to get your input on. One, what is your expectation for this team in 2025 as it stands right now? I know there's a lot that can change. There's a spring window. Other teams are going to add players. And then two, what are your thoughts on the QB situation, kind of going into 2025 with Barron being hurt, Hammond getting all the reps in the spring? Just give your thoughts on those two things so we can kind of get your perspective there.
Yeah, I would tell you that if you're not in Arlington, then playing for the Big 12 title, it's been you've fallen short. I think
Wow.
that's just kind of where it's at, and I'm uncomfortable with that a bit just because you've never made it to Arlington.
Mm-hmm.
But I think there are donors, and there are Joey will tell you that should have been there last year. You weren't good enough on the lines of scrimmage, either one on either side of the ball to get there. And I think you were, in some ways, we may look back and be surprised that you were as good as you were this past year, considering how mediocre you were up front. Because it's a trenches game, guys. I mean, I've been down on the field before, and I've seen what Oklahoma looks like and Texas looks like at their best. LSU in a bowl game, Ole Miss in a early season game when they had DK Metcalf at receiver, and you're like, my God, like we don't have anybody come close to that looks like these people.
Yeah.
And it just it's a visual, it's stunning because you see how you feel like you're playing a different sport. And I'm not trying to bow down to the SEC, but at some level it's just different. And you just weren't very good up front, okay? And I think that's the part about the 25 team that I'm most excited about, or intrigued, however you want to phrase it. The 7 linemen that they essentially brought in, 3 on offense, 4 on defense, because that's ultimately going to decide this deal. Reggie Virgil may be a good receiver. The Joyner kid could be really good at running back. All these DBs that you brought in, your kicker should, hopefully is good and all that. But they're not going to decide this deal and whether you make it to Arlington or not. It's those guys up front that's what's going to decide. And the other topic that you brought up, it's can you be better at QB than you were last year? And I think right now that's a huge question because the guy that's probably going to be doing that is out for the next 4 to 5 to 6 months, or I don't know if we know that. And that's a bit of that's why, you saw a lot of the conversation in the last week to 10 days about, whoever it was that they did never reach out to Carson Beck. That's not true.
Yeah.
I think that I'm not saying they weren't going to talk to him, but at the time that a lot of that was reported, I think that was coming from agents and all those things. And when you think about it, you maybe have an interest for a quarterback because you have a question at your quarterback because he's unhealthy and you just don't know what it's going to look like on the other side. Well, Carson Beck's the same thing. Yeah. He's had surgery from the same surgeon that did Baron Morton. So that one didn't make any sense. And plus his girlfriend's at Miami and she's probably making more money than he is on the basketball team and all that stuff. But that part you can't overlook. That's a question. And whether Barron is a question, and we got Will Hammond. Well, isn't he a question too? I mean, I think Will Hammond has a bright future. Did I think he'd play a bit better in the bowl game? I did, but it wasn't all on him. But I think however you look at this is a question, and I think that maybe there was some talk about, do we try to go find more of a sure thing or eliminate some of this question and depending on what's out there, or anyway, all having said that, they decided, I guess, not to, and I think they're going to stay status quo there. But yeah, the expectation, man, is you better be in Arlington. And I'm not saying if you're not, then everybody's out or you're going to, move, but that's the realistic expectation for the season. You don't have these people donating this kind of money and have this kind of portal class, and then, and here's the thing: you're guaranteed nothing. It's really difficult. There are really good coaches. You never win in Manhattan, Kansas. I've seen many a loss up there. You got to go there. Arizona State might be the favorite. Again, you got to go there. It's tough to win in Morgantown. You've never played in Utah before, but there's plenty of landmines out there. You're not guaranteed anything on this deal. So, but did you put your best foot forward? Yeah. And did you add a lot of big people? Yes, you did. Now it's Joey's job to bring it together. I mean, look where I just came from. Kansas State basketball is a great example. They spent a ton of money, and they are not very good because they have a lot of talent, but they don't have people that want to do the things that it takes to win. The grind, the dirty work, and all that. They got a couple of $2 million players, and one of which really didn't even play the other night. And so just because you spend doesn't guarantee you anything. It's going to take a lot, but I do like what they did, and I think it's better than sitting on your hands hoping that it gets better, and all that. So shout out to Jerry Jones, who's just hoping that his fortunes will turn with the Cowboys. But yeah, that's what I would say about the 25 season. I mean, that's just kind of how it sets up for you.
High expectations.
As it stands right now, I think it's not 100% chance that Barron starts game one, but it's definitely, higher than 50. What are you, if you had to give a percentage as it stands right now that he trots out game one as your starting quarterback, what do you think it is?
Well, it's an impossible question to answer from the standpoint of when is he cleared? What does this look like? Does he have full range of motion? They went out of their way to tell you this was an elective surgery. This isn't something he had to have. He obviously wasn't on the injury report all year, and he played pretty well at times. And and I said this on our show with Cowan, but okay, we all wanted the QB play to be a bit better at times, and there's some throws that he misses and things like that. But he made some plays for you too. But how much of that, you had a bunch of drops. You weren't good up front. And how healthy really was he? Like maybe healthy enough to play, but I mean, how much, arm strength did he lack? How much, just what did all that look like? And so maybe he gets right and you're better up front, and maybe you really like the results here, but this is just an open-ended question. I do think if he's cleared and able to ramp it up in May, June, whatever that looks like, I would think that he'll be the favorite. But Will, going through the spring will benefit greatly just from a chemistry standpoint and the reps. I mean, the kid, he's special, and he takes it extremely seriously. Yeah. And I think similar to like how I watched Tyler Shuck take it very seriously. And you got to be different as a QB, man. Like it's a different deal. It's a lot of not fun stuff that you've got to be really good at or want to do to be any good at it at that level. And there's a lot of time in that film room and all that kind of stuff. And so I think Barron has gotten to that point, but Will is already there. So we'll see. But as I've said, man, you need both of these guys. That's what it's going to take. You're going to have two guys at least. Unfortunately, we've lived that life for way too many years.
Go ahead, Z.
Go ahead, Brennan.
Yeah, Chris, and I was going to say it's a weird place to be getting into the spring, kind of relying on a true sophomore quarterback to still run the show while Barron's recovering. So it'll be an interesting place to be kind of getting to the spring game and everything as well, too. But I think a lot of the fan base obviously was excited for Will. So at least in what he can do in the bright future that he has. So I still feel like that people still trust Barron. Do you get that sense that it's like, hey, this is Barron's team. If Barron's good to go, there is no concern after the bowl game.
Yeah, and the head coach trusts him, and I think that he's earned that. He's played through a lot of stuff, and I think he'd be the first one to tell you he wants to play better, and he'll know what the expectations are. But see, he's going to be tasked with like trying to gel this whole thing. Mm-hmm. That's really, when his arm's in that sling, that's going to be his job, is trying to build that chemistry with all these new pieces and trying to get all these guys on the same page and all that stuff. It's going to be pretty fascinating, actually. I've said this too, but this is like one of the most, I theoretically, because I'll tell you this, I think at some point you're going to get away where there is no spring football anymore, or there's not a spring game. Everybody now doesn't really do it, or they don't put it on. I've done the TV, the telecast for those for, I don't know, and with Robert, with John Harris, with a variety of people, when they make a big deal about it, and you have a big recruiting weekend, it's just kind of a fun deal. And now in the last year or two, everybody's like, we're not doing this because we're just going to show everybody our guys, and then they'll go snatch them and get in the portal and all that. So they don't want to do that. And I think eventually you'll just see spring football the way it currently is in place just go away.
Interesting.
Yeah. I do think that's not too far away from happening, but we have that now. And I do think this will be one of the most important springs, if not the most important spring that you've had around here in a long time.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. Well, Chris, we as we close the show, I wanted to ask you two final questions. First, we just thank you so much for being on and sharing your story coming up through Texas Tech media and just how much you love this university. But if I had to ask you who your favorite athlete all time was at Texas Tech, hard hitting questions here to close the show. I know you're a graduate of the university, you've worked for the university, so you've been around a lot of these athletes. But if you had to pick one, who are you picking?
Darvin Ham.
Ooh, interesting answer.
Yeah, Darvin was he was, whenever I was in school, that was that run of those teams, and I'm biased because those teams were unbelievably good. I thought he was a fascinating player because he would either travel or dunk it or tear down the backboard, and he was just the ultimate tweener. Okay. And but I would when I was doing Tech Talk, we would have Darvin on the show on occasion when he was an assistant with the Bucks, and just he's the best guy. And I would see him. Like Tech played football in New Mexico, and Darvin I think he was playing for like the Albuquerque Thunderbirds, or there was some connection there. He was either coaching or playing there. I can't remember. And he came to the game and we talked, and I just was like, he's an awesome dude, man. And I grew up in the Metroplex, and he played for the Mavericks. He did some TV stuff for the Mavericks. So yeah, I'm going way back there, but I could give you a list of 50 names, but that's one that I hold near and dear because he was so gracious with his time. But I remember when we talked to him about the NBA playoffs one time on the show, I just reached out. I was like, man, I told Robert, I'm just trying to get Darvin on. He's like, awesome. And he goes, he texts me back at me. He's like, yeah, man, what time? So we hook up and we get him on the phone, and he's like, well, I'm sitting here in Portland right now. This is all on the air. He's like, I'm sitting here in Portland right now. I'm trying to draw up some stuff to try to guard Damian Lillard. And it's just cool. I don't know. Because he was living the NBA coach's life. And then obviously we know he was the head coach of the Lakers, which I wasn't a fan of because I was like, that's not going to end well for him. But yeah, there's your long answer on one guy. Love the guy.
That is a great answer. Yeah. And just, yeah, unfortunately, it didn't work out for the Lakers, but I don't think that's on him as much as it is on the guy he was coaching. So,
right, you got it.
Is there a final send off for Chris Level? Is there the last 20 years of your youth, before you kind of hit maybe this, the 70s, 80s range? Is there anything that you'd like to eventually do, or do you feel like, man, I'm at home in Lubbock working where I am, and until they send me otherwise?
I thoroughly enjoy what I do. I have like 5 different jobs. It's stressful at times. I don't get bored, but it's very, you try to do right by whoever you're working for at the time. And some days, like on a Saturday in the fall, I'm working for like 4 different people, depending on the time of the day or what deal it is. But no, I don't know how long I'll do all this stuff. The football and basketball broadcasts, those are fun, but those will take a lot out of you because there's a lot of travel. Yeah. And, luckily though, my kid, I've got a daughter that's a junior in college and then a son that's a junior in high school. I missed a lot of their stuff. I have a lot of regrets there. But thankfully I don't walk around with a lot of that regret now because they're almost done with it. But I don't know, man. I'll probably keep doing this stuff for I don't know, another 10 years. I don't know. I really don't
Keep
think
going, man.
about
Don't
it. I
sell
don't know.
yourself short.
Yeah, I don't know, man. Because I'm around guys like John Harris has been doing this stuff for like 40 years.
Yeah.
Jeez,
And
man.
he's not getting any younger. And Jensen is in his mid 60s, I think. And I'm fortunate enough to be like with those guys. They're just so good at what they do, and I've learned a ton from them. And they're friends and colleagues and all that. But these, like the broadcasting part, these people, like, because I know everybody in the league, and now we're getting to know new people in the league that we haven't ever played against, and now they're conference mates and all those things. But so many of these guys have been doing these jobs for so many years, and I'm thinking, like, am I going to be one of these, these like gray-haired guys that, like, can't set up his own equipment and can't, I don't know. But yeah, I mean, I've still got some more years in me though. But you guys were awesome. I hope I didn't bore you or anybody, but you guys were nice to have me on, and anything I can do for you, man, let me know. But yeah, guns up, man.
Well, guns up, man. Thanks, Chris, so much. And we appreciate you and hope to be listening to you for years to come as well across all 5 of your jobs. Whatever we can get more Chris level, we're happy to have you. And so make sure, if this is your first time listening to the show, to like this channel or like this video, subscribe to our channel. Then we'll have Locked On's link in our description below. If you haven't heard Casey and Chris, you must go check them out every morning on Locked On Texas Tech, wherever you get your podcast as well. So for Chris Level, Clayton, Conrad, and Zyler, I'm Brennan, and we'll see you guys next time on the Broadway Shuffle. Wreck 'em.